Hello all, welcome back to FAD Learning. As you are probably aware, Angular is moving away from RxJS and Zone.js and adopting a signal first approach. So today we are going to explore one of the most exciting features introduced in Angular 21 called signal forms. So what is signal forms? The signal form is an experimental library created by the Angular team that helps us to manage state using Angular signals to provide automatic synchronization between your data model and the UI with Angular signals. So in this video, we will dive how to create signal forms with validation in Angular 21. And if you are already familiar with reactive forms or template driven forms in Angular, you will notice the differences and understand why signal forms might be a better choice. So let's get started. I'll open Visual Studio Code, and here first I'll create new component using command ng generate component name signal forms, and inside this app component template file I'll add the selector of signal forms component. Also, I'll import the signal forms and delete this test for now. Okay, now I'll run this project using command ngserve, and let's test the signal component is rendered on the web or not. Let me navigate to this localhost 4200, and as we can see, the signal forms component rendered on the web. Now we can start the coding. Let me open the signal forms component template file as well as TS file. So let's get started by creating a simple login form using signal forms. So here, let's use a basic HTML tag. So first I'll write form, and then I'll take one div. Inside div, I'll add label, and the first field I'll take email. And then I'll take one input field of type email, in placeholder, enter email. Similarly, I'll take one more div for password, and the password and input type is also password. And after this second div, I'll take one button with type equals to submit, and button name is login. Okay, so this is how I have created simple login form. Now let's focus on class file. So let me minimize this, and I'll split this window and open the TS file here. And inside TS file, first we need to create a variable. And in Angular 21, we need to create signal variables instead of regular variables because the application is zoneless. And in zoneless application, changes to regular variables don't trigger automatic updates, but signals are designed to track changes and update immediately. For example, if we update a signal variable, its new value will be reflected right away, even if we log it to the console after a delay. So from Angular 21 and above, we must have to create signal variables. But here, before creating a variable, first we will create an interface to define the structure of our login form. Interface, interface name, let's say iLogin data, I for interface. And this interface will have two properties, email and password. So email of type string and password of type string. Now I'll create new signal variable called login model equals to, we need to write signal in order to create a signal variable. And here we can specify the type. So inside triangular bracket, we need to write the interface name, iLogin data, and it will store the data inside object. And while creating structure, we have taken two fields, email and password. So here also we have to write the same fields, email colon empty string and password colon empty string. Now next we need to create a signal form by calling a form function and passing it to the signal variable, that is login model. So here I'll create signal form. I'll name it login form equals to form function, and inside this form function we need to pass the signal variable, that is login model, and we need to import this form from angular/forms.signals. Okay, so this login form is assigned the result of this function call, and the form function returns a form object that provides access to form data and validation results, such as login form.email for accessing the email field's value and validation string. So then let's bind the email and password fields to our template file using two-way data binding. And in signal forms, we need to use field directive instead of ng model for the two-way data binding. And to use field directive, first we need to import that directive, which is imported from angular/forms.signals package. And now inside template file, I'll write field directive inside square brackets. Field equals to login form dot email. Similarly, I'll write for password. Field equals to login form dot password. Okay. So this field directive is used to bind the property of the form object, and this login form dot email or login form dot password is the property of form object. Okay. So inside template file, we have created simple form, and inside class file, we have created a signal variable. We have created the interface, and then we have bind the login form properties to the template file. Now last, we need to create a method that will be triggered when the login button is clicked. And in signal forms, we can achieve this either by assigning a click event handler to the login button like this. Click equals to function name or method name like on submit, or by specifying the submit event on the form tag here. Instead of click, we need to use the submit event like this. So both approaches work well. Like either you can call this on submit method from this button using click event, or you can call this from the form tag using submit event. So I'll go with this submit event, and let me define the same on submit function inside the class file. And inside this function, I'll log the signal variable, that is this dot login model. So that with the help of this console.log, we can see the user entered value. And to access the signal variable's value, we need to use the parenthesis like the function call. Okay, so I have added the parenthesis after login model. And now let's navigate to the browser. Let me inspect this page. Navigate to the console tab. Let me clear the console. And here I'll type abc@gmail.com and password 1234. And once I click on the login button, you will notice that the credentials are being appended to the URL instead of being logged to the console. I'll do it one more time. Let me clean the URL. And now here I'll type abc@gmail.com and password 1234. Now I'll click on the login button. You can see the same user entered credential is appended to the URL. And this is because we are not using the zone.js library. So to prevent this and handle the form submission correctly, we need to pass the $event parameter when calling the onSubmit function and use it to prevent the default form behavior. So let's do that. $event, and let's update the onSubmit method in our TS file to accept the event of type event. And then we need to call the prevent default method on it. Event.prevent default. So this method prevent the credentials from being appended to the URL. So now when we test this form again, the URL should remain clean and the credential should be logged to the console. Let me delete this credential from the URL and refresh the page. Let me clear the console. And again, I am entering the same email and password. Now, when I click on the login button, the form is submitting correctly and the credentials are logged to the console. And one more thing to note, when we log the entire form, like this login form, let me log this here, login form, and now save the changes. Let me re-enter the credential. And once I hit the login button, you can see the entire form is printed here and the entered values are nested under structure, then values, and then under symbol this signal, and under values you can find the user entered credentials. But while logging, the form model signal gives us a direct object representation of the values. Okay, so far we have covered the basics of creating a simple form in Angular using signal forms. Now let's take it to the next level by adding built-in validation for required fields, email format, minimum length, and more. And to add validations, we will update the login form in our class file, this login form. And for validation, this form function takes two arguments. First is the login model, which is a signal holding form data, an object with email and password properties. And second argument is a callback function that defines the validation rules for the form. So let's add the second argument to the form function, which we will call schema path. So here I'll write a CHEMA path. Next, we will use a fat arrow syntax to define the callback function, where we will specify our validators. So fat arrow syntax and inside curly braces, let's start with the required validation for the email field. So for that, we will use the required function and pass schema path dot email along with the options object that specifies the error message. So inside curly brackets, I'll type message colon error message. Email is required. So this will display the email is required if the email field is empty. Next, we will add the email validation using the email function. Email and inside round brackets, first argument will be schema path dot email, comma, second argument inside curly braces, we need to write the message. Message colon, enter a valid email address. So this email validator will validate the input as an email address and display the enter valid email address if it's not in a correct format. Okay, so we have written required validator and email validator. The syntax is straightforward. Just call a validator function, pass the property you want to validate, that is email or password, and then specify the error message in an object within curly braces. Now, similarly, I'll add required validation to the password field. I'll copy the same required validator here and update the property. Password and password is required. And this third validator will display password is required if the password field is empty. Okay, so far we have added three validations, and now inside HTML file we will use @if blocks to conditionally display error messages based on states like touched, untouched, valid, invalid, etc. So let me navigate to the template file, and here I'll update both div, email and password. So first we'll work on email. After this label, I'll add if condition @if, and inside that I'll write login form dot email dot, I'll use property touched, and login form dot email dot invalid. If the email field is touched and invalid, then in this case I'll take UL, and inside this UL I'll use @for control flow block. And we will use this @for block to iterate over the errors in login form dot errors. So here I'll write error of login form dot email dot errors. And then I'll write track error. And then inside LI I'll use string interpolation, error dot message. Now save the changes. Okay, so here I have used if block to add the condition touched or invalid, and at the rate for block to display the error message. And to use if and for block, we need to import the common module. Now I'll copy the same if and for block and paste it inside the password div. Here instead of email, I'll write password. Now one last thing, let's disable the login button until the form is valid. So inside the template file, I'll write disabled inside square bracket equals to login form dot invalid. Okay, now save the changes and let me refresh the page. And before testing the validations, let's add some CSS to make the form look better. And since I haven't written any CSS yet, I'll copy paste the CSS from Angular's official documentation as we have worked on the similar form. I'll navigate to angular.dev and here I'll search the form. Inside forms, I'll go into signal forms and then validations. And here I'll click on the source code and I'll copy this whole CSS from this app.css and I'll open the signal form CSS file and here I'll paste the CSS. Okay, let me copy this again and paste it here. Okay, so here all the CSS are applied to the tag names like div, label, input, and there is one class error list. So this class I'll apply to our errors. Inside this UL, I'll write class error list. Same I'll do for this class equals to error list. So by doing this, we can see the error in red color. Okay, now save the changes and let's navigate to the browser. Let me refresh the page and CSS is not yet applied. So let me rerun this project one more time. NGS signal forms HTML. There is an error. Okay, it should be disabled, not disabled. Okay, now save the changes and still we are getting error. Here we don't need to use parentheses. I think in the email also I have added. Okay, now no error. Okay, let me close this and navigate to the browser. Let me refresh the page and now the login page is looking good. So let's test this login form end to end. If I touch this email input field and I leave the cursor, we can see the error message, email is required on the web. Similarly, if I touch to the password field and leave the cursor from there, then we can see the error message, password is required. Now last, if I write only ABC, you can see the different error message, enter a valid email address. So we have to enter the correct email address, means along with at the rate and dot. And after that, if I type the password error message also gone. And if I click on the login button, we can see the entered credentials on the console. Let me do it one more time. Refresh the page, touch both the fields and leave the cursor from both the fields. We can see the required error message. If I type incorrect error message, then we will see the error, enter a valid email address. And if I enter a valid email address, then there is no error message for email field. Similarly, inside password, we can type any password and then you can click on the login button. Okay. And that's the end of this video. If you're familiar with Angular's reactive forms and template driven forms, you have probably noticed how much simpler signal forms are. But if you are new to these concepts, I have created separate videos on reactive forms and template driven forms with validation examples. So kindly check out these videos. Links are available in the description below. And I hope you now have a basic understanding of the Signal Forms API. I repeat, this is an experimental API, so it's great for practice, but wait for the official release before using it in production. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching. And if you like my content, please support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to FAD Learning for quick and easy learning. Thanks again. Bye bye.